Hi, my name is J'nell Ciesielski, and I'm the author of The Socialite, which just came out in April earlier this year. And today I'm going to be reading the first chapter with you. So let's get started. Chapter 1, Paris, 1941. Bloody lipstick. Kathleen Whitford yanked a handkerchief from her handbag and rubbed off the uneven line of sequin red curving over her lip. Angling her gold compact mirror to the streetlight, she swiped the red tube over her mouth again. Can't meet the Nazis with smeared lips. Slipping the mirror back into its place, she raised a shaking hand to pull the silk scarf from her head and tuck it safely in her beaded handbag. She looked up at the pristine white brick building posed as the Grande Dame of Rue de la Université. Light, laughter, and music spilled out of the open windows on the top floor, chilling her to the bone despite the late July air. Relax, it's only a party. You've been to a million of them before. Her wooden voice bounced off the gleaming oak front doors and smacked her in the face with irony. Yes, a million parties filled with dukes, lords, ladies, and even the king for her presentation at court. Curtsying before his majesty had been a cakewalk compared to this. Buckingham Palace hadn't been filled with German officers or their mistresses. Her heart panged. Ellie. Throwing her shoulders back, Kat covered her pain with a bright smile and a gentle sweep of her lashes, just the way Mother had taught her, and marched in. Her black velvet pumps ticking across the gray marble foyer drowned out the hammering of her heart as she climbed the sweeping staircase all the way to the top. Following the music to the door on the right, she took a deep breath and raised her hand to knock. Before she could enter, the door burst open. Out tumbled a German uniformed soldier with a woman in a gold dress in his arms. Entschuldigen, the man laughed, grabbing the woman around the waist before she slid to the floor. Red lipstick smeared the woman's lips as she twisted her head to grin up at Kat. She thrust a half bottle of champagne under her nose. "Do you like a sip?" Kat pushed the bottle away and shook her head. "Non, merci." "C'est bien." The woman wagged the bottle, slashing the golden bubbly down her dress. Kat leaned back out of range of flying drops. "Non. I'm saving my appetite for the water." "Water?" The woman scrunched her nose for a second before delight lit up her hazy eyes. "Oh, you joke." She swiveled back to the man, grazing her red lips against his neck. "Did you hear that, chérie? She wants water." "Yes, I heard," he said in rough French. A jest, surely, as no one drinks water in France. "Come on, Schatz. Our night continues elsewhere." With her welcoming party skidding their way down the stairs, Kat pushed into the flat. A temptation to turn and run hit her like a wall of ice. A crush of German soldiers in gray uniforms and women in their finest evening attire stood cream wall to cream wall. Overhead, a chandelier dripping with crystals reflected off the mirrors and gilded frames lining the walls, while the deep blue brocade drapes swathed floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street and Ming vases filled with white lilies stood in each corner of the spacious room. "Madame?" A waiter appeared at her elbow, offering her a tray of champagne, wine, and cognac. Kat shook her head and edged around him. The last thing her roiling stomach needed was spirits. Her feet sank into the thick carpet as she dodged between couples dancing to the warbling tunes of Edith Piaf blaring from a gramophone. Enduring elbows, the crushing of her toes underfoot, and champagne splashed on her red satin dress, she made it to the other side of the room. She braced her back against the archway dividing the front room and the dining room loaded with food and scanned the crowd through the haze of cigarette smoke. Her fingernails dug into the glossy white trim of the doorway. If Ellie weren't her baby sister, there would have been no power on earth strong enough to drag her willingly into a room full of Nazis. Then again, if Ellie had learned to temper her impulses, she wouldn't be in this horrible predicament to begin with while leaving Kat to sweep up the chaos, as always. A waiter popped up in front of her with a tray of canapes. His eyes dropped to her clinging hands. "Madame, may I escort you to a chair?" Breeding surged to the rescue. Letting go of the wall, she clasped her hands in front of her and smiled. "Non, I was just looking for the hostess. Have you seen her?" "Madame Eleanor?" His brow scrunched as he glanced across the smoke-laden room. "She has gone to get new records." A clatter of trays echoed from the double doors at the back of the dining room. The doors flew open, and out breezed a petite blonde on a cloud of cigarette smoke. "Just sweep it up and get me new ones," she called over her shoulder in scratchy French. "Charles Trenet or Rena Ketty, someone upbeat. The last thing I need is this party to drag from dull music." The pebbles that had plunked into Kat's stomach since the second she stepped on occupied soil dropped like a boulder. Gone was the innocent girl she had known, replaced by an unrecognizable woman, a woman who radiated happiness, not misery like she'd expected to find. Air wheezed from her throat. Ellie. Her sister stopped dead in her tracks, her long silver cigarette holder dangling precariously from her fingers. Her cherry-red mouth formed a perfect O. Seconds dragged by as Kat waited for German hands to grab her and toss her out. This was a mistake. She should have waited until morning to drag her wayward sister back across the channel without the whole of the Third Reich watching. She should have... Ellie's feet moved, delight springing to her blue-green eyes. She launched herself at her sister. "Kitty cat!" Kat barely caught her little sister before she bowled them over into a stack of crackers, foie gras, and bullhead cheese on the gleaming mahogany dining table. "Oh, Kat, you're here, really here. I can't believe it." Wrapping her arms around her sister, Kat squeezed her tight as a flood of relief washed away months of worry. Ellie was all right. "Can't breathe," Ellie coughed, tapping her on the back. Warmth rushed to Kat's cheeks as she stepped back. "Sorry." "Take one foot off the island. Suddenly your stiff upper lip is no more." Ellie laughed and brushed a wrinkle from Kat's shoulder. Her bright smile faltered. "What are you doing here? Nothing bad has happened, other than you running off to occupied France to become social secretary to the Nazis," Kat thought. "Do I need a bad reason to visit my sister?" Kat smiled in an attempt to capture the runaway with honey rather than the vinegar eating her up inside. One false move, and the girl would spring like a deer from the crosshairs. She raised a hand to Ellie's rouged cheek. "It's been nearly a year since I've seen you. How fine you look." Ellie beamed and reached up to touch the diamond comb sweeping the blonde curls up on one side of her head. Independence radiated with her every move. "Yes, I quite think the French air agrees with me." Kat's smile twisted. It wasn't French anymore. The Germans patrolled the Louvre and the Champs-Élysées as if they marched in the Rhineland. If the fighting went their way, they would soon goose-step through Piccadilly Square. She took a deep breath to calm the acid burning its way up the back of her throat. The Germans weren't her priority. She traveled here to bring back her sister. Hopefully the process didn't involve binding, gagging, and throwing her into the back of a waiting car. "I thought I'd have trouble finding you once I got here, since you never sent an address." "You cannot fathom how busy I've been, and the post takes so much longer to circulate these days." Ellie took a long drag from her cigarette. Smoke curled out from the corner of her mouth. "How did you find me?" The wary note in Ellie's voice hung in the air like a curtain of iron. The wrong answer, or any answer involving their father, would bring it crashing down. Sir Alfred Whitford's arm was long-reaching, but his money and connections knew no boundaries, including using his university friends at Scotland Yard to track down his youngest daughter. "I asked the concierge to point me to the hottest ticket in town. Who would have thought that meant a Brit?" Kat's throat ached on a forced laugh. Turning, she cast an appraising eye over the room, and in such a swanky place, right in the heart of the 7th arrondissement, très chic. A woman with platinum blonde hair swished by as she attempted a tango with a bottle of Sauvignon. A frightened waiter chased after her with a cork. "Eric would have nothing less than the best," Ellie said, uncaring for the safety of her white rugs. "The district was once for the rich, so it's only fitting that we claim it for our own, the new nobility for the new world." Eric. The name spoken with such intimacy screamed like a siren in Kat's head. Her baby sister living with a man. The situation was sickening at best. As always, instead of heeding the warnings of all around her, the girl had run straight into the fantasy she had conjured for herself. Only instead of boys, dance halls, and bathtub gin, she had thrown herself into the arms of a vile ideology and a man she knew nothing about, except that he offered an escape from the crushing grip of their parents. Hooking her arm through Kat's, Ellie guided her back into the crush of guests. The crowd parted for her like Moses in the Red Sea. "As the new Queen of Paris, I shall introduce you to all my friends. You'll love them." "I don't know if I could hear introductions over this din." Kat pointed to the gramophone now blaring C'est Bien. "What? Oh no, these aren't my friends. They're mainly Eric's." Ellie took another long pull from her cigarette before tapping off an inch's worth of ash into the nearest Ming vase. I talked to them too, of course, but my dearest friends couldn't make it tonight. Dread curled in Kat's stomach before she dared the question out loud. Who is this mysterious Eric? Light sparkled in Ellie's eyes as her lips curved into a dreamy smile. The most wonderful man, with the most beautiful blue eyes you've ever seen. Everywhere we go, men clamor to shake his hand and women purr for his attention, but he belongs to me. Her eyes clouded for a moment, or at least he will soon. Kat pulled them to a stop behind the powder blue settee. On the other side, a game of stacking empty wine glasses on the Queen Anne end table was well underway. What do you mean? Nothing at all. Darling, what are you saying? Kat bit her tongue. Prodding further into this Eric character would lead to nothing good. She had a big enough headache already. The St. Regis. Not anymore. You're staying right here with me and we'll stay up all night chatting just like we used to do. Witness glistened in Ellie's eyes. She bit the corner of her lip. I've missed you, Kat. A lump bobbed in Kat's throat. I've missed you too. We all have. We? The witness blinked from Ellie's eye. Yanking a fresh cigarette from the bodice of her gown, she jammed it into the holder and lit it. That's why you're really here, isn't it? The firm sent you to drag me back. Well, I'm not going. I'm staying here, so you've wasted a trip. I came because I haven't seen or heard from you in over a year. As you can see, there's nothing to worry about, because I'm doing quite well. Free to do whatever I like for the first time in my life. Well, I didn't know that back in jolly old England, where you left me. Kat took a deep breath, pushing down the stab of betrayal. Different as night and day, they were still sisters. They'd shared secrets, giggled until all hours of the night, gone ice skating together and shopping. Their memories were wrapped together in shared childhood, but it hadn't always been easy. Kat adhered to the rules while Ellie lived to break them. Kat followed the well-ordered path the family laid before her, while Ellie traipsed into the grass without a backward glance, abandoning her. Sisters weren't supposed to abandon each other. Whatever sense of betrayal that radiated in Kat's heart did not show in her sister's polished face. For all her grown-up airs, the past year hadn't taught Ellie to consider her actions' effect on others. Now wasn't the time to raise those hurts, nor was it something a well-bred lady would bring up. If Kat represented anything, it was a lifetime's lesson of good breeding. How about a glass of that famous French champagne for you, dear parched sister? Ellie raised a slender eyebrow. Parched for champagne, and here I thought tea was the only thing running in your veins. When in Rome, or in this case Paris, Kathleen Whitford, the living prodigy to duty, dips her standards to partake with the sinners, will wonders never cease. You above all others know I'm no saint. Sure, and I've got a halo hanging in my closet. Never one to hold a grudge for too long. Ellie snorted and waved a waiter over. Grabbing 2 glasses from his tray, she handed one to Kat. To Paris. Raising her glass, Kat clinked it to Ellie's. To sisters and their halos, or lack of. A large man with a white apron and beads of sweat dotting his forehead poked his head around the dining room wall. Scanning the room, his eyes stopped on Ellie. Miss Eleanor, are those macaroons done yet, Pierre? Ellie drained her champagne glass. Oui, but it is not the macaroons you need to worry about. With the corner of his apron, he wiped away the sweat dropping down to his ear. Jean-Claude has delivered the oysters, and well, miss, they are less than expected. What do you mean? More sweat popped out on his. They are less. He held his thumb and forefinger an inch apart. Oh, for pity's sake, I told him only yesterday to... Never mind, it's done now. She set a glass on her shelf next to Victor Hugo's Les Miserables and Chanel's latest fashion of 1936. Kat, you can entertain yourself, can't you? Have another drink and mingle. Most of them don't know English, but their French is passable. Oui, oui, Pierre. I'm coming. Mingle. Dread crawled down Kat's spine as gray uniforms danced before her eyes like a kaleidoscope of drab color. Throwing herself into a pit of vipers would be more bearable. Grabbing another glass of bubbling champagne, she skirted around the dancers and pushed through the double doors out onto the balcony. The smell of sweet freesia mingled with the night's gentle breeze. Kat gripped the wrought iron handrail, the cool metal a relief against her warm palms. She dropped her chin to her chest. If appearances didn't need maintaining, she dropped her cheek down to the smooth rail for a brief respite from the abomination of merrymaking behind her, while the people of the country cowered in terrified submission to their oppressors, and her sister in the middle of it all. An ache groaned up inside her. How wrong she'd been to imagine a tear-streaked Ellie falling into her arms with a desperate plea to whisk her back home. Back by Tuesday. Wasn't that what she said to her parents as they waved her off at the train station last Saturday morning? Her naivety had crashed down around her ears with a starry-eyed look from Ellie. Her sister was in pure bliss, like a fawn unaware of the prowling wolves. A knot twisted in Kat's stomach. Father would be furious if she gave up and allowed the family name to be smeared through the German mud. He'd never trust her to accomplish his purposes again. Taking a deep breath, she lifted her head. She dreamed of visiting the city of lights with its tree-lined avenues, museums, and smoke-filled cafes. But tonight the magic was doused beneath blackout curtains. Except Ellie's, of course. An eclipse couldn't shadow her sister's sparkle. It was a trait Kat had failed to grasp when weighted with the responsibility of family duty, but one that whispered wistfully to her. Perhaps when the war was finally over and Ellie safely at home, she could come back and enjoy the city in her own time. No rules and no one else deciding which parks she could stroll through or how many crepes she could eat. Pure bliss. Metal twanged. Kat peered over the rail to the empty street below. The cobbled gray thoroughfare was deserted, with every window shuttered and door locked tight. Even the mice had succumbed to Nazi rule after dark. Scuffling. More metal slap, like something heavy hitting a wall. Kat leaned farther over the rail, inching sideways down the balcony as the scuffling drew closer. Her pulse pricked. What if one of those legendary sewer rats had escaped in search of midnight delicacies, like the cave-ripened brie perched on the edge of Ellie's buffet table? She wiggled her toes. Velvet Ferragamo pumps were the wrong footwear to take on a rodent. You might want to stand back. Kat jumped. Who's there? A large shadow swung over the balcony and dropped next to her. She screamed. Shh! You'll wake the neighbors. A second scream caught in Kat's throat as she stumbled back into the rail. The shadow leaped forward, catching her around the waist. Her hand flew up and struck hard. Ow! Pain shot through her fingers. Careful of the buttons, lass. They'll leave you smarting. Pulse careening, she shoved against the dark mass in front of her. Unhand me at once, you prowler. Prowler? The R rolled off his tongue in a muted burr that kicked her pulse in a completely unexpected way. The securing arms fell away on a loud snort of laughter. Hardly. Who are you? What are you doing here? She inched away, stretching her fingers out in hopes of finding a loose rail or forgotten champagne glass to clobber him over the head with. If it's money you want, you should know I have nothing more than a hanky and a tube of lipstick in my handbag, and the guests inside have undoubtedly lost all spare coins in their drunken haze. He shifted, blocking her view of the people inside, and their view of her. I'm afraid you have me mistaken for someone else. Who else but a man with sinister deeds in mind prowls rooftops in the middle of the night and scares women alone outside? Her fingers brushed a potted geranium. I've been called many things, but sinister is a new accusation. Besides, if I'd gone out burgling, I would have worn something more accommodating. He stepped into the shallow glow of the sconce by the doors. Tall, with dark hair combed to the side and a clean, angular jaw, he was dressed in a black dinner jacket that accented his thick shoulders. He pointed to the bow tie at his throat. See? Her heart tripped. Fine jackets and starched white shirts were nothing more than a required uniform in her social circle, but this man wore them with a jagged edge of danger, as if they didn't quite fit. Her fingers curled over the lip of the pot, a new breed of thief, easy to slip among the guests while you rifle their pockets. Alas, I think you've been out here in the dark too long. Your imagination has run amok. As he reached for the door, she grabbed the pot and hurled it. He ducked as it sailed an inch over his head and crashed against the wall. He swung back to her, dark eyebrows slashed together and eyes wide. What in blazes do you think you're doing? I didn't scale the side of a building to be taken down by a bucket of dirt. You can scale right back down or I'll scream for the police. There are close to 40 German officers in there who would love nothing more than to... She peered around him to the party still swinging inside, all hope of rescue dying. Ignore my cries for help as they spiraled into a drunken waltz. I can see that. He brushed dirt off his shoulder and nodded as two uniformed men swung a laughing woman back and forth to the lively tempo inside. Personally, I don't think you need their help. Your aim is quite lethal on its own. Too bad you're out of ammo. Ignoring the knowing smile in his voice, she bent her knee and raised her foot back to grab a velvet pump. Don't count on it. Before I get a shoe or hairpin or that chair they're throwing at me, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Barrett Anderson, owner of the Blue Stag. He gave a short bow. So you see, as a businessman, I have little use for picking German pockets when they can come to my club and hand over the money willingly. How enterprising of you. The panic surging within her ebbed. She lowered her foot. "A little far from home, aren't you, Mr. Anderson?" "A little farther than Berkshire, for certain." A dark eyebrow raised in acknowledgement. "Same as our hostess." "What a coincidence." "Sisters aren't coincidental." At her look of panic, he gave a short laugh. "You look alike. Same upper accent." No point in denying it. Half of Paris's Gestapo was inside. "So you've met Eleanor?" "Briefly. I doubt she remembers. It was a New Year's party." "Was there champagne?" "Of course." "Then no, she doesn't remember." Kat pressed her fingertips to her throbbing temple. The night had turned from horrendous to excruciating, and now this man had thrown in an unnecessary tangle. "However did you get up here?" "Drainpipe. I would have come in the door, but there was a woman greeting her guts in the potted flowers just outside the building doors. Thought it best not to interrupt." She glanced over the rail to judge the impressive feat. What else did this mystery man have up his sleeve? "Very considerate. Might I ask what you're doing here? Most Brits have packed up and left the city by now." He leaned forward, catching the lantern light in his dark blue eyes. "I could ask the same of you." Warmth fluttered up her neck as the deep blueness probed for the secret she kept locked away, not to mention her heart and the bruises it carried. "Perhaps it's best to each mind our own business." "Up to you," he shrugged, a lopsided grin tilting his lips. "As for me, I'm heading inside before all the good drinks are gone and nothing is left except for the swill one of the waiters scrounged up on the black market. Care to join me?" She clasped her hands together to keep from taking his offered arm and shook her head. She needed a few more minutes to refasten her armor before jumping back into the lion's den, and preferably without him watching her every move. "I'll rejoin the gaiety soon." Music poured out on a roll of laughter as he opened the door. "Enjoy your evening, Miss Whitford." So thank you for joining me today for the reading of the first chapter of The Socialite. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did enjoy it, want to continue reading, it's available at Amazon and Target and Barnes & Nobles and all the other regular places where you can purchase books. So thank you for having me today.